"He's having a seizure. What have you done?" I shouted as my brother-in-law Michael convulsed on the playground rubber matting, the HOA president standing over him with a taser in her manicured hand. My 8-year-old autistic nephew Tommy screamed in terror, covering his ears as his father twitched uncontrollably on the ground. "He was threatening me," Karen Morrison declared, her designer sunglasses reflecting the afternoon sun. "I was enforcing the rules. Do you know who I am? I'm the president of this HOA." "Do you know who I am?" I replied, already dialing 911. "I'm Justice James Harrington of the United States Supreme Court. And you just tased my family." The color drained from her face as the taser slipped from her fingers. In that moment, she realized she'd made the biggest mistake of her entitled life. 3 days earlier, I'd arrived at my sister's new suburban home fresh from my Supreme Court confirmation. "Watch out for our HOA president," Sarah had warned. "She's targeting Tommy because of his autism." I never imagined how far this power-hungry woman would go to enforce her discriminatory rules. But Karen Morrison was about to learn a harsh lesson about justice, the kind that doesn't care about your designer handbag or HOA title. What happens when a neighborhood tyrant meets the highest judicial power in the country? Let me tell you how it all went down. The Oakwood Estates playground was impressive. New equipment, rubber ground covering, and shade trees. Tommy headed straight for the swings, his happy squeals as Michael pushed him, making me smile. I noticed a stack of violation notices in Michael's pocket. When I asked about them, he sighed. "Karen fined us $200 last week because Tommy was making excessive noise during therapy. We've had his developmental pediatrician write letters explaining his needs, but she doesn't care." He showed me the violations on his phone. Special needs. Swing set not approved, $150. Excessive noise during unauthorized activity, $200. Improper ground covering in sensory area, $175. Each signed with Karen's flourishing signature and threatening notes about property liens. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. Sarah looked away. "You were in confirmation hearings. This seemed small compared to that." But it wasn't small. It was blatant discrimination against a child with disabilities. 3 days into my visit, I witnessed Karen's harassment firsthand. We were having lunch in the backyard when she appeared at the fence, camera in hand. "Excuse me," she called sharply. "That canopy over Tommy's sensory area exceeds the height restrictions by 2 inches. Tommy covered his ears at her harsh tone. "And that's another noise violation. He's humming to self-regulate," I explained calmly. "It's part of his autism." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I don't care what it's called. Rules are rules. And your sister signed the HOA agreement." She pointed her manicured finger at Sarah. 3 violations this week means you'll be facing the board on Monday." After she left, Tommy remained distressed for hours. Sarah broke down in tears. "It's like this constantly. She follows him with her phone, recording if he makes any sounds." That evening, I met Mrs. Chen, an 80-year-old neighbor. "You're Sarah's brother?" "The judge," she whispered, checking to see if anyone was listening. "You need to know, your family isn't the only one Karen targets." Mrs. Chen explained her grandson with Down syndrome stopped visiting because Karen said his appearance was disturbing. The Patels were fined for ethnic cooking odors. Mr. Rodriguez received violations when his extended family visited on weekends. "She goes after anyone who's different," Mrs. Chen said. "But no one stands up to her because she has the board in her pocket." The next day, Michael showed me a certified letter they'd received. Karen was demanding they remove all of Tommy's therapy equipment within 48 hours or face daily fines of $300. "We can't afford this," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "But Tommy needs his equipment." "Let me help," I offered. "This is discriminatory and illegal." Michael shook his head. "She'll make things worse if we fight back. She carries a taser in her purse and brags about being ready for troublemakers." Taser? This was beyond HOA tyranny. That afternoon I learned more about Karen's reign of terror. She'd been president for 3 years, during which property values had risen, but so had complaints. She used selective enforcement, golf playing. Retirees could break noise rules, but children with disabilities couldn't make a sound. She'd forced 3 families with special needs children to move out through relentless harassment. "Tomorrow is the monthly community play date," Sarah said. "Tommy loves it, but Karen always finds a reason to make us leave." "Not this time," I assured her. "I'll be there." Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather. Tommy was excited for the playground, especially the swings. "They help my body feel calm," he explained in the thoughtful way children with autism often describe sensory experiences. We arrived to find the playground empty except for Karen and 2 board members, clipboards in hand, watching our approach, like vultures. "Remember," I told Michael and Sarah, "you have every legal right to be here. Don't let her provoke you." Tommy ran ahead to the swings, his face lighting up with joy. "I have a bad feeling about this," Sarah whispered. Karen immediately began taking photos, her face set in grim determination. I knew then this wasn't just random harassment. She had come specifically to confront us. As I watched Tommy swing higher, laughing with pure delight, I saw something soften in the faces of Karen's companions. For a moment, they saw what I saw, just a child enjoying a playground. But Karen's expression only hardened. She straightened her designer jacket, clutched her pink clipboard, and began walking purposefully toward the swings, her heels clicking aggressively on the pavement. "Here we go," Michael muttered, moving protectively closer to Tommy. I took a deep breath and prepared for what was coming. 20 years in law had taught me to recognize when someone was spoiling for a fight. And Karen Morrison, HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood dictator, was definitely looking for one. What I didn't know then was just how far she was willing to go. "Excuse me," Karen called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Those swings are for children aged 5 to 7 only. Your son needs to get off. Now." I glanced around the playground. There were no age restriction signs anywhere. Michael slowed. "Tommy's swing gently." "He's 8, Karen," Michael said calmly. "And there's no one else here using them." She pulled out her phone, snapping photos. "It clearly states in Section 12 of the HOA guidelines that equipment is age-restricted for safety reasons." Tommy began sensing the tension, his body stiffening as his routine was interrupted. His hands started flapping slightly, a self-soothing behavior common in autism. "5 more minutes, please," Michael asked. "He needs transition time." Karen's eyes flashed with irritation. "This is exactly the problem with your family. You think the rules don't apply to you." She stepped closer, her voice rising. "This is a community space, not a special needs facility." The deliberate cruelty in her tone made my blood boil. But before I could intervene, Tommy began showing clear signs of distress, covering his ears and rocking slightly. Michael recognized the signs immediately. "Tommy, it's okay, buddy. Deep breaths, remember?" he said softly, implementing calming techniques they'd practiced. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about," Karen snapped, pointing at Tommy. "This inappropriate behavior disturbs other families." There were no other families present, just Karen and her 2 silent companions watching disapprovingly. Michael stood protectively between Karen and Tommy. "My son is not inappropriate. He's having a completely understandable reaction to you harassing us." Karen stepped even closer, her face inches from Michael's. "I am not harassing anyone. I am enforcing the rules everyone agreed to when they moved here." Tommy's distress grew. He began making the high-pitched humming sound that helped him self-regulate. Karen's face contorted with anger. "That noise has to stop immediately. It's violating our noise ordinance." Michael took a deep breath, clearly struggling to remain calm for Tommy's sake. "We're leaving, but you need to back up and give us space." Instead of backing away, Karen reached out and grabbed Michael's arm. "Don't you walk away when I'm talking to you. I've had enough of your family's constant violations." What happened next occurred so quickly I barely had time to react. As Michael gently removed her hand from his arm, Karen reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small black device. "I warned the board this might happen," she announced loudly. Before anyone could react, she lunged forward and pressed the taser against Michael's side, triggering it with a horrifying crackling sound. Michael collapsed instantly, his body convulsing on the rubber matting beneath the swings. Tommy screamed, a heart-wrenching sound of pure terror as he watched his father fall. I ran to Tommy first, pulling him away while he fought against me, desperate to reach his dad. "Call 911!" I shouted to the shocked board members who stood frozen behind Karen. Karen stood over Michael, taser still in hand, her chest heaving. "He was threatening me," she declared, though her voice wavered slightly. I was defending myself. I managed to get my phone out while keeping one arm around Tommy, quickly dialing emergency services. "A man has been assaulted with a taser at Oakwood Estates playground," I told the dispatcher, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need police and an ambulance immediately." Karen's expression shifted from righteous anger to uncertainty as she watched me make the call. "He was being aggressive," she insisted, looking to her companions for confirmation. They stepped back, clearly wanting no part of what had just happened. Tommy was now rocking back and forth, tears streaming down his face. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered, though we both knew it wasn't. "Help is coming for your dad." Michael was beginning to stir, groaning as he tried to orient himself. Karen seemed to suddenly realize the seriousness of her actions. She dropped the taser and took a step back. "He shouldn't have resisted," she said, but her voice had lost its authoritative edge. The distant wail of sirens filled the air as I helped Michael sit up slowly. "Tommy," he mumbled, reaching for his son. "Is Tommy okay?" The police arrived first, followed closely by an ambulance. As the officers approached, Karen immediately launched into her version of events. "This man was violating playground rules and became aggressive when I confronted him," she declared, gesturing dramatically. I was forced to defend myself. The officer turned to me, notepad ready. "And you are?" he asked. This was the moment. Until now, I'd been just Uncle James, focused on my family's safety. But I needed to establish credibility quickly. "My name is James Harrington," I said calmly. "I'm Tommy's uncle and Michael's brother-in-law. I witnessed everything that happened here." The officer's pen hovered above his notepad. "Can you tell me what you saw, sir?" I nodded, keeping my voice level. "Ms. Morrison approached us at the playground, demanded that my nephew stop using the swings, citing an unposted age restriction, used discriminatory language regarding his autism, physically grabbed my brother-in-law when he attempted to leave the confrontation, and then assaulted him with a taser when he removed her hand from his arm." The clarity and precision of my statement seemed to catch Karen off guard. She wasn't used to someone who could articulate events with such authority. "That's not he was," she sputtered, but I continued. "Multiple witnesses saw the entire interaction," I added, gesturing to the board members who had accompanied Karen. Their uncomfortable expressions told their own story. The paramedics were attending to Michael, while another officer was gently speaking with Tommy, who remained visibly distressed. Karen regained her composure quickly. "Do you know who I am?" she asked the officer, her voice dripping with practiced authority. "I'm the president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association. I have the right and responsibility to enforce our community rules." The officer remained professional. "Ma'am," HOA authority doesn't extend to physically assaulting residents, regardless of any rule violations. Karen's face flushed with anger. You don't understand. These people have been problematic since they moved in. The child is disruptive. They've modified their property without permission. I interrupted her calmly. Are you referring to the medical accommodations for my nephew's autism? The ones protected under the Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act? Karen turned to me, eyes narrowed. Who exactly do you think you are? Some kind of lawyer? The officer looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. Sir, may I ask what your profession is? He inquired. I hesitated briefly. I had planned to keep my new position private during this family visit, but circumstances had changed. I'm a federal judge, I said simply. I was recently appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States. The silence that followed was deafening. Karen's face drained of all color, her clipboard slipping from her fingers and clattering to the ground. The officer's professional demeanor cracked momentarily as surprise registered on his face. I see, Your Honor, he said, straightening his posture instinctively. We'll need complete statements from everyone involved. Karen seemed unable to process what she had just heard. Supreme Court? You can't be. That's impossible, she stammered. The second officer approached, looking uncomfortable. Chief wants to know if Justice Harrington would prefer to give his statement at the station rather than here in the open, he said quietly to his partner. And that was when the reality of what Karen had done truly hit her. She had just tased the brother-in-law of a Supreme Court justice while discriminating against his autistic nephew. Her face crumpled as the implications washed over her. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. How was I supposed to know who they were related to? It shouldn't matter who they're related to, I replied evenly. No one deserves to be treated this way, regardless of who their family is. At the police station, Karen's story began to unravel further. The taser she carried wasn't registered and she had no permit to carry it. The age restrictions she had cited for the playground equipment didn't actually exist in any written HOA guidelines. Most damning of all, the two board members who had accompanied her admitted this wasn't the first time Karen had targeted families with special needs children. She said they bring down property values. One woman confessed, unable to meet my eyes. She's been trying to force them out for months. Karen was charged with assault, carrying an unregistered weapon, and violating civil rights statutes. But the real change came from the community itself. Neighbors who had suffered silently under Karen's reign of HOA terror suddenly found their voices. An emergency HOA meeting was called, and the community center was packed beyond capacity. One by one, residents shared stories of harassment and discriminatory enforcement. The pattern was clear. Karen had specifically targeted families of color, elderly residents, those with disabilities, and anyone who questioned her authority. By the end of that meeting, the entire HOA board had resigned, and a new interim board was elected with a mandate for inclusive governance. 6 months later, I returned for Tommy's birthday. The transformation was remarkable. The once sterile community now buzzed with diversity. The playground had inclusive equipment for children of all abilities, and a sensory garden had been built where overwhelmed children could reset. As for Karen, her legal troubles mounted. Criminal charges, financial fraud investigation, civil lawsuits from multiple families. She eventually moved away, but not before the court ordered her to repay every discriminatory fine she had ever issued. Uncle James, Tommy called, tugging at my hand. Everyone gets to play here now. That's the most important rule. Out of the mouths of babes comes wisdom that even Supreme Court justices can learn from. Sometimes the most profound justice isn't found in courtrooms, but in creating communities where everyone belongs.